this thing on?
There we go. That was a good clap.
Last summer, my friend Chris asked me if I could make him a wallet. But at the time, I was working and living at an off-grid lodge in the Rockies, so I didn't really feel equipped to take on any custom work. Fast forward to now, and I've gotten settled in my new tiny apartment workshop where I've started doing more commission projects. So about a month ago, I texted Chris and said, "All right, man, I'm ready. Let's make you an awesome custom wallet." So we started designing it together. Chris liked the size and shape of his existing minimalist wallet, but wanted something handmade, custom, and a little less chewed up to replace it. I came up with a simple design and made a paper mock-up to test it out. Once I got Chris's okay on the size, shape, and number of pockets, I sliced apart the mock-up so I could use it as a template to cut out the leather. The back of the wallet is cut from 5 to 6 ounce veg-tan leather. I laid the paper template directly on the leather and used a utility knife against a steel ruler to cut out the rectangle. The pockets are all cut from 1 to 2 ounce veg-tan leather. Now that the pieces were cut to size, I marked the midline of the wallet body. I used my super skiver to remove some thickness from this line so that the wallet will easily fold in half. I used the trick of bending the leather backwards over itself so that the blade is cutting right at the midline. When using this technique, you have to be careful that you don't skive too deep or go right through the leather, which I've done in the past. I wanted to smooth out the flesh side of the wallet body and get rid of that fuzzy texture. I started by brushing on gum tragacanth, which is used as a burnishing agent. Then, I rubbed this in with my edge burnisher in a single direction. I checked which direction of rubbing makes the fibers stand up and made sure to rub in the opposite direction. This basically presses all the fibers flat and gives you a smooth and shiny flesh side. Chris asked if I could carve this drawing he had made onto one side of the wallet. After we made a couple adjustments and settled on a final version of the drawing, I sized it so I could trace it directly off my laptop screen. The tracing looked a little empty around the perimeter, so we decided to add a few more shapes to fill in the design. On the other side of the wallet, Chris wanted an evergreen tree. To stay with a line drawing aesthetic, I traced only the outline. I wet the leather and ran my pencil lead over the tracing to emboss it into the leather. For a carving like this where messiness is highly visible and I want really crisp lines, I let the leather dry out pretty good before carving with my swivel knife. If you carve the leather while it's still soaked, you end up with kind of mushy looking lines. After adding my maker's mark, I moved on to carving Chris's line drawing.
raising the Tobagos, we growing like fresh tomatoes. Them boys on fire, too fuego, we pass it round hot potato. Everything is new wavo, I'm with my sweetie like Quavo. Need my cheese, need that queso, need my bread, need that bankroll. Wake up, yes Lord, I'm thankful. Another day on my schedule, steady blocking the devil. I tell a hater, God bless you. Cherish moments that special, you gotta keep the memento. If you love me, then I love you, and I could never forget you. Some memories don't fade, sometimes you miss the old days, but nothing changed unless you change. What's around you, how you think, how you live, how you speak, how you walk, how you blink, how you talk, how you teach, how you reach, let it sink. What's your purpose, what's your passion? Good pain, what's your plan? Is it plane, on a plane, hydroplane? I'm just playing. What's your purpose, what's your passion?
I wanted to add a subtle accent to the pockets. I wet the leather and then used the back of a butter knife against a straight edge to create a light indentation along the top of each pocket. This highlights the crisscrossing diagonals in a really nice, understated way. Before applying finish, I oiled all the pieces with neat's foot oil and left it to absorb for about half a day. I usually use this step to replace the natural oils lost when dyeing leather, but I feel like there's no harm in oiling undyed leather as well. I finished all of the pieces with 2 coats of carnauba cream. This is a really easy to apply natural wax conditioner. You just wipe it on, allow to dry, and buff with a soft cloth. The label on the carnauba cream says to be careful about keeping the conditioner out of tooling, but I don't really bother with this. As Chris uses the wallet and it develops a patina, stuff's gonna get in that tooling and add to its character. In my mind, a little bit of natural finish isn't gonna make a difference. Now I was ready to assemble the pieces into a functioning wallet. I marked areas for contact cement with my scratch-all and used an old paintbrush to apply the contact cement. I was really careful to keep the contact cement as close to the edge as possible so that the pockets didn't turn out too tight. Once the contact cement was dry to the touch, I carefully aligned the pieces and pressed them together.
What's your purpose? What's your passion? Did it pay? What's your plan? Is it play? On a play? How to play? I'm just playing.
I repeated this process for the inner layer of pockets. Instead of splitting hairs over getting the pieces perfectly lined up, I made the template a little oversized so that I could trim the edges flush after assembly. I added a small radius to each corner by chamfering them with a razor blade and then smoothing this into a curve with 120 grit sandpaper. Now I was ready for quite possibly the 2 most satisfying things in leathercraft: edge beveling and adding a stitching groove. Both of these tools can add a lot of finesse to your leather projects, and I'll have links to the ones I use in the description. I used my scratch-all to punch stitching holes in the 4 corners. The rest of the stitching holes were punched with my diamond chisels. As their name implies, the diamond chisels punch a diamond-shaped hole. This allows for rows of really nice angled stitches, but the diamond-shaped holes don't really cooperate with 90-degree turns. I learned recently that circular holes in the corners allow the stitches to turn 90 degrees, and you end up with cleaner stitching in the corners. I got the wallet clamped into my parallel jaw clamp and started saddle stitching with some natural colored waxed thread. One of these days, I'll finally make a stitching pony, but for small projects like this, clamping a parallel jaw clamp to the table gives you a pretty solid makeshift stitching pony. When I got back to where I started, I backstitched 3 times, cut the thread flush, and pressed the ends of the thread into the stitching with some beeswax. Tapping the stitches with a mallet presses them into the leather and makes the whole wallet feel a little more finished and premium. The last thing to do was burnish the edges of the wallet. I wet the edges with plain old water and then rub them with my wooden burnishing tool. This polishes the leather fibers, giving you a smooth, shiny edge. Once the edges were 90% of the way there, I rubbed them with beeswax and then went around for a final pass with the wooden edge burnisher. One of my favorite things about commission work is it gets me to do things that I never would have done otherwise. Translating Chris's line drawing into a leather carving forced me to work in a style that I had never worked in before. I think his drawing looks fantastic on the wallet, and it has a surreal, playful quality that really balances the simplicity of the evergreen tree on the opposite side. I'm really happy we decided to leave the leather undyed and without antiquing. As the leather darkens over time, the contrast between the carved and uncarved leather will increase, and I'm excited to see how this wallet will look a year from now. I've been friends with Chris for a long time, and I'm really happy I was able to make him something that is undisputably, uniquely Chris Berry. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out the rest of my channel. I have videos about making all sorts of stuff. If you'd like to directly support my work, or you're interested in a custom piece of your own, check out the links in the description. And as always, have a great day.